This installment of the Anguilla Financial Services Commission's FinTech and Compliance webinar series was recorded on location at Merivale Villa in Anguilla, British West Indies.
Hi everyone. On today's episode of the Anguilla Financial Services Commission FinTech and Compliance webinar series, we have today with us Mr. Vince Cate. And Mr. Vince Cate is no stranger to the technology world or the tech world of Anguilla. Mr. Cate has been a resident in Anguilla for over 30 years, and he has contributed tremendously to developing tech and tech literacy in Anguilla. So he's the owner and operator of Bitcoin.Ai Ltd, which is a Bitcoin ATM on island. And I'll just hand it over to Mr. Cate so he can tell us a bit more about himself.
Okay. I grew up in California, Silicon Valley, and I actually had a software business of my own when I was 17 years old. And then I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad and Carnegie Mellon for grad school. I came close to getting a PhD, and I decided I'd rather move off to the Caribbean. The first business I actually did here was email, and there wasn't any email in Anguilla before I did that. And I registered .ai domain. I needed to register .ai domain to do this, and there wasn't anybody doing .ai domains. And so the god of the internet, Joe Postal, gave it to me, basically. So I've been involved with .ai domains for a long time. We had a mailing list in the early 90s called Cypherpunks, and a couple of guys on the list and I started a financial cryptography conference in Anguilla. And it was here for 5 years, starting in 1997. The people on this list were all fans of cryptography and encryption and stuff, and we knew that there was a way somehow to use that to move money around securely, and that it would be cheaper, faster, safer than the existing systems, and so eventually it would take over. And the conference was people trying to figure out what was the right way to do that sort of thing. And eventually, I actually started a company called Secure Accounts, trying to do it. Several other people at the conference were doing other things to try to do it. The one that finally really worked was Bitcoin. And I always wondered if Satoshi, the guy that wrote Bitcoin, was somebody at the conference. I don't know. Yeah.
I do note that there's actually, well, in previous conversations, we know that some of these guys that attended the conference actually moved on and are big players in some of the leading innovations in crypto, in the crypto world. I'm not sure if you would want to disclose any names, of course, but it's just so interesting to know, at least 20 years ago, that type of initiative started here in Anguilla.
Yeah.
And to see where we are right now, it's just amazing, and it's a good feeling to be part of the foundation or the beginning of such great things. You can tell us a bit more about your experiences in cryptocurrency from a Caribbean perspective, and what are some of the interesting issues that you've actually observed in the space?
Okay, so it's because it's a new thing, people have to learn how to use it and get comfortable with it and all that. It's interesting. Some of the people that are using it are like, well, my kids are using it to buy video games on the internet at steamgames.com. There's some group of people who have family in Venezuela, and in Venezuela they destroyed the currency, and then they have price controls and exchange controls, and it's really hard to do business. And most of the stores don't even have much food on the shelves. But if you have Bitcoin, you can order food delivered to your house, right? So there's people in Anguilla that are sending Bitcoin down to family in Venezuela. And it's kind of fun to see that.
Yeah, definitely amazing. Do you know of any other island in the Caribbean that has accepted Bitcoin or cryptocurrency and embraced it and is currently using it in day-to-day activities?
There's been some stuff going on down in Trinidad or something, or there's a few places that are doing stuff, but most don't have too much. Like they don't even have an ATM on most of the islands.
Right. So that's definitely an issue. The fact that there's so much to be harnessed from the growth of cryptocurrency in the region, and there's still so much undiscovered. So I guess if you would correct me whether or not that would be considered an issue, but I think that's definitely an issue. The reach of this type of innovation to the Caribbean, or the acceptance of this type of technology.
Yeah. It's going to grow and grow and grow. There's been some growing pains, I would say. For me, the ATM has broken several times. The company that's doing the software has had problems a number of times. Even with the COVID, I was trying to get a new touchscreen for the ATM, and China shut down. And then when the factory reopened, the airplanes weren't flying in China.
Right.
So there was a long time where I couldn't get a new touchscreen for the ATM. Eventually, we ended up writing our own software so that we can comply with all the know your customer rules and still make it not too hard to do the trades and have good records and everything. And so that's called Ricotra, and we made it open source. So that was sort of how we had to handle this, because the ATM was just down too much. And now that with this software, even when the ATM is down, we can take customers. And I think we're going to see a better growth now that it's reliable.
So I think this is the perfect segue into my question about your ATM, your Bitcoin ATM. So we know that you've had a Bitcoin ATM on island for about 2 to 3 years. It's been operating, and it's currently licensed by the commission. So can you tell us a bit more about how the ATM works, the type of customers or interactions you've had with your customers, and whether or not you see the Bitcoin ATM being something that is eventually distributed widely across the island and the region itself?
Yeah. Okay, so when I got mine, there were only about just under 1,000 ATMs on the whole planet. Now there's 12,000. So it's definitely growing very fast.
Right.
And I expect it to keep growing fast. It's much more cost effective, much faster, more secure than all the alternatives wire transfers and Western Union and credit cards. And the fees on all those are much, much higher, right? So anybody that can use Bitcoin, after they've used it a few times, they tend to go back and keep using it, right? So it definitely will grow. The way it really works, the ATM is not connected into any other network except the blockchain, right?
Right.
And so I don't have any affiliates or anything like that.
No intermediaries in between.
And all we're doing is buying Bitcoin and selling Bitcoin for US dollars, right? And we try to buy at a lower price than we sell at, so that we make a profit.
Right.
But it's really like a currency trader who's doing euros at an airport. They're just buying and selling euros. We're just buying and selling Bitcoin.
Right.
We're not connected into anything,
Right.
except Bitcoin. So it's
Well, that's pretty interesting. So, Mr. Cate, I'll have you give us some further details and explain exactly how does Ricotra work, which is the software program which you would have developed after experiencing issues with your Bitcoin ATM. And towards the end of this segment, we'll actually provide you with a demo of how the software is used. So.
Okay. So it's the same thing as the ATM, that we're buying and selling Bitcoin, but we want to keep the records of the customers. So we actually make a little ID card which has a barcode, a QR code, so the computer can scan in and know the customer and pull up the right information for the contract. And then it scans in their Bitcoin wallet address. It puts that on the contract, and it saves it in the database too.
So it's almost like an ID card, and you're capturing all of that KYC stuff. Okay.
And then they sign, we both sign the contract, we have 2 copies, so that there's a nice paper record of the transactions, which you can scan the QR code and then go look on the blockchain and see the transaction, right? So it's all sort of nicely documented, and because it's done on paper and with signatures and whatnot, it's like a normal business.
Official, traditional stuff.
It fits, the customers I think it's easier for them to start using this paper method than to use the ATM.
Yeah.
That it's actually more comfortable.
Right.
Yeah, so we just wrote this and we've made it open source so people can get it on GitHub and stuff.
Oh, that's great. All right, so tell us a bit more about the different transformations you've actually observed, witnessed in the Caribbean and internationally. Some of the different movements, policy decisions that have been made in terms of cryptocurrency, and what are your thoughts on the movement or progress that have been made thus far in the space?
Okay. Well, it's interesting, since, when I came here, everybody's using fax machines, and just the fact that we did email helped sort of move people forward, and they've sort of stopped, nobody uses fax machines anymore, right? I think the same sort of thing is going to happen with crypto, that as people get used to this, in 5 or 10 years from now, it'll be like fax machines to, paper checks or credit cards, nobody will use them anymore. We're having some issues, like the banks used to let me send euros to buy Bitcoin, but after Brexit, I guess they lost the partner that they were using,
the correspondent
bank. And the one that they have always used for dollars would never let me do anything related to Bitcoin. But it means that now I can't actually wire money to buy Bitcoin. And so that's a little bit challenging.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the issues. I think everyone that wants to get into the space, that's an issue that they're experiencing. You have to make sure that the entire ecosystem supports innovation and these types of different products. And we know that it's a new something, it's not the traditional type of financial services that we're accustomed to. There's a lot of tech involved, and where tech is involved, people tend to shy away. But we have to create an ecosystem. All traditional players and all new and innovative players can have a piece of the pie and contribute accordingly. So the banks, yes, they have a bit of a time to catch up, I should say, with the times, and understand what FinTech is, and how much the population can benefit from FinTech. So I can definitely understand that pain, and I don't think it's a pain that we in Anguilla are only experiencing. I think this is something that is a global issue.
But it turns out that what I'm doing is, when I sell domain names, I'm letting people pay with Bitcoin.
Right.
And so I actually get Bitcoin from that. So I have sort of got a connection to the rest of the world because we're selling the domains to the rest of the world. So I actually am getting Bitcoin and able to sell it to people. So we're sort of connected to the Bitcoin world, really, even though the banks aren't helping.
And that's definitely another issue as well. The cross-border transactions, and making sure that the regulators and different regulatory authorities in different jurisdictions that are part of the transaction are welcoming of the transaction as well. Because you don't want that you have transactions that are actually being conducted with residents of your jurisdiction, and you have no idea of, or you do not know the parties that are affiliated, are involved in the transaction. So I think that's one of the major issues when it comes to innovation, and in terms of ATM, Bitcoin ATMs are transfer of cryptocurrency. The fact that these types of transactions happen across borders and not within the jurisdiction, it creates a whole set of other issues.
Well, and in the past, you always had a bank involved, whether it was credit cards or wire transfers or bank accounts or checks. And as long as the regulators could watch what was going on at the bank, they could watch everything.
Exactly.
But now you can go directly from one user to another with no bank, which suddenly makes the supervision different, very much harder.
I think there's a certain level of trust that has to be gained in the industry. So we here in Anguilla, I this is not the views of the commission. These are my personal views, but I think that we have a long way to go in terms of financial literacy and persons understanding the different types of products that are available to them in terms of conducting day-to-day transactions or transactions with persons overseas, whether it's your brother, your sister that's living overseas, or a company that you're doing business with. I think we have a lot to learn in until we learn the options that are available to us and not just the traditional options, then we won't yet embrace this new beginning. And I say beginning because it definitely is a beginning that would take over what we now know as financial services. Yeah. Okay, so I'll move on to my next question, which is basically, in the race to adopt and integrate digital assets, what challenges have you seen specific to the Caribbean? So I know that we would have discussed, the mindset and the culture and trying to get the different current financial services authorities and the central bank. We have the Central Bank of the Eastern Caribbean, Currency Union. But what other challenges do you see other than them having that mindset or conditioning their minds to educate themselves about the growing space and the growing sector?
Well, there's little things like, it takes longer when you order something from Amazon to get here. So if you need to replace something, you got to have spare parts. And, we're a smaller jurisdiction, so you don't have as many experts in all the different things that you could in some bigger place.
Right. But don't you see that as an advantage, though? I don't want to say that because we're small means that we're at a disadvantage. I think that the fact that our populations are much smaller, it's better for a testing environment. So it's easy for us to bring in these different types of innovative products and services and actually test them, the population testing these different services and products. I think that is definitely an advantage, the size of our population, don't you think?
Yeah. And it could be easier too, if I have one sign that says Bitcoin in town, like everybody's going to see it eventually. And word of mouth and whatnot, it's easy because it's this contained market. It should be easy. Now that I have a reliable way to provide this service, I'm actually going to start advertising seriously on Facebook.
Right.
Up to now, I haven't advertised because this machine kept going down, and I would hate to spend money advertising and then have the machine down, right?
Completely
so it was
understood.
very frustrating. But now I feel like, okay, we're good. We can, any day we can take care of our customers.
Yeah.
And so probably like Monday, I'll start doing some advertising. I expect that we can get it to catch on quite quickly.
I think once people understand the benefits and they understand how to use these things, it's easier for them to embrace them. And I will say that recently I actually downloaded the Kraken app and the Coinbase app, just to get a feel for how these markets work. I know I've been seeing so much changes and fluctuations in the different cryptocurrencies on the market. I haven't bought any as yet, but I just need to understand how these things work. And while it may be intimidating because it's something new, they make it so user friendly. So the instructions, just the step-by-step guides, once you actually log in. And to me, I feel like there's so much different security measures and levels that are in place. So, this is a space where security is a concern. And I think that, these different service providers are actually going above and beyond, and they're trying to, show the users that, hey, this is what you're using, this is very secure, it's safe, and we're going to make sure that, your assets, your currency is actually protected.
So a place like Kraken is an exchange which is holding your Bitcoin or your money.
Cryptocurrency.
And so you can exchange between the currency, the Bitcoin, and back and forth and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a different thing than the people that are coming to me. They just have an app on their phone, a Bitcoin wallet. And they're just coming to me, and we're putting Bitcoin on their phone, or they're sending Bitcoin from their phone to me. And so I don't have to hold any assets for anybody.
Right.
I'm
You're
not
holding your own wallet.
Everybody has their own wallet with their own keys on their own hardware, and so I'm not. We don't have that level of risk that somebody like Kraken has.
Right.
There have been exchanges which had millions of dollars, and then the
Disappeared.
exchange got hacked, or the owner took the money, or something happened, right? And so we're not doing that.
So all it is basically, it's if we have to compare it to something that everybody can relate to, it's like a bank account. You're holding funds on your bank account, and say for instance you want to go to the ATM and you're withdrawing money that you have, but you're not holding the money, you're not the bank. It's
really like I'm the guy at the airport that's buying and selling euros.
Exchange.
Okay, and you come to me if you want to change your dollars to euros or your euros to dollars, right? Well, it's Bitcoin to dollars or dollars to Bitcoin.
Right.
But you don't have any account with me.
Right.
And the same euros that you have, you could go spend them anywhere else. The same Bitcoin you have, you could go spend them anywhere else. It's not tied to me in any way. So
it's you're right in saying that it's just a currency exchange.
Right.
So
now to the user, they may feel like it's a bank account, right? Like they put
well,
money.
That's exactly.
They put money in the ATM and they take money out of the ATM, and it seems a lot like an ATM at a regular bank, right? But it's not really, right? Fundamentally, it's a different thing.
Right. So that's what I was trying to get across. That I think for some of our viewers that are not versed in the space, if you have to compare it to something that they understand, because for the user, it's almost like you're going to the bank, and because the funds that come in or go out of the ATM is basically being transferred to your wallet. If it's Bitcoin that you're buying, it's going to your wallet. But it can also be viewed as a currency exchange, because you're basically converting from Bitcoin to fiat or vice versa, more specifically US dollars. And those funds are being transferred using your wallet, which stores your Bitcoin. All right. So hopefully that's a bit clear, because it's a new space. And like I said, once persons can understand how it works, then I think they'll be more open to the idea of using Bitcoin or any other type of cryptocurrency.
Yeah. Bitcoin, so people are also using it like an investment, right? Because it's gone from like less than $1 to 13,000 something.
Fluctuates, right?
Right. So, but if it's gone up by that more than a factor of 13,000, it's a nice investment if you've had it, right?
Right.
So, and it's something that you can do with $100. You can just get a little bit of it, right?
And watch it grow.
And watch it grow. So, and I think there's still lots of room to grow, because there's still lots of people that aren't using it, and it's potentially, it could even replace the US dollar. Now, here's why. The US government has like $27 billion or $1 trillion in debt, right? If people start seeing inflation, they will sell these bonds, because the interest rate on the bonds is so low, the inflation could easily be higher than that.
Right.
But as they sell the bonds, the only person buying it will be the Federal Reserve by printing new money.
Right.
Well, if they print more money, there's going to be more inflation. And then people will sell the bonds faster, which will make them print money faster, which will make more inflation, and you get a death spiral. And so at some time, there will be a flood of people selling the bonds and a flood of new money printed, and the value of the dollar will collapse. And at that point, now, if you're in Venezuela, when the money collapses, you can use Bitcoin, right? Well, the same thing can happen everywhere else. When the dollar collapses, people may just start using Bitcoin.
Not to say that, the US government would allow that to happen, but it's very possible.
It's not like they can stop it.
Yeah.
Well, no, they could. Okay, the problem is they're spending like twice what they get in taxes. And as long as they're spending twice what they get in taxes, they need to keep selling bonds and printing money, basically.
Right.
And the only way they can get out of this is to actually cut their spending in half. They just can't. It's just not actually, it's not actually possible. And this has happened in many, many other countries, many other times.
Right.
When they get to where they're spending that much compared to their taxes and their debts are that high, eventually it just collapses.
Yeah.
So when it does, what else do we have?
Not when, not if, when.
It's when.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's 5 years from now. I think it's, 2, 3. I don't think it's
Really?
long. Yeah, they're really pushing it now. So anyway, Bitcoin could go from, the current value compared to the dollars of, 13,000 to a billion times or
Right,
something, right? Because
right.
the dollar could collapse.
Right.
And so if you have some Bitcoin, it could really save you in the future. So some people are buying it sort of like an insurance policy, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh.
I've been following it for maybe almost 2 years, and most recently maybe in the last year. And if you watch the way that the value fluctuates, and it's, to me, it's almost correlated to different events that are happening globally. Events on the stock exchange, the stock market. I think that I don't want to say a direct correlation, but there is some influence, I believe, in the value. And then different activities or events that are taking place. So major agreements, major announcements to do something, not necessarily, actually putting in place something. But I've been watching the space, and it's very interesting to see that it's something that anybody can get involved in.
Yeah.
And it does not have to be a whole set of money that you're putting into this thing, like you would have alluded to earlier. It can be $100 or less than $100, and you just keep buying every month. And once the value increases, then your input also increases over time. Yeah. All right. So moving on, can you tell us whether or not you think there's scope for greater engagement in the wider community, whether locally, regionally, and when I say regionally, not just within the ECCU, but in the entire Caribbean region?
Okay, so for sure locally, like I said, I believe it will get it ramping up much faster now that we have a reliable system, so that there will be lots and lots of people using it within a year in Anguilla. That'd be very common.
And I'm pretty sure that you have a lot to do with that.
Yeah, yeah. As far as in other places, I think it's being adopted more and more everywhere. So throughout the region, I expect more and more usage for sure.
All right. And not only with usage, like going back to the point that I made earlier, financial literacy, that is a must. As it is now, we have a population that does not quite understand or does not want to understand how to use a credit card or the ATM machine. We still have folks that prefer to physically go into the bank. We have folks that prefer to use cash than to use a debit or a credit card. So when you have a population with those types of preferences, it's going to be a bit more difficult to even get them to Bitcoin if they can't even get to using a debit card or a credit card. So I think financial literacy.
Well, I don't know, but there's reasons to not want to use credit cards or whatever, and maybe Bitcoin doesn't have those problems, right?
Well, that's true, but in actually educating the public about the different benefits, I think you may jump and hop and leap right over the credit cards and the debit cards and go straight to Bitcoin. But definitely cost, I think, for us here in Anguilla with the different banks, international banks that would have provided correspondent banking relationships for local banks. I think that with the de-risking that has been going on, not only in the Caribbean, in Anguilla, but in the Caribbean region as a whole, in the increasing cost of having to do business through a bank, like you said earlier, the cost of sending a wire transfer or the inconvenience of having to stand in a long line
Or do
at
all
lakes
sorts of
to
paperwork.
use Western
Yeah.
Union, the paperwork that's involved, all of those different pains. The Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, they will definitely eliminate or eradicate
Yeah.
those issues. So once people understand the benefits, like I said, I think they'll be more open to. So definitely in terms of engaging the public locally, financial literacy first and foremost, to get persons to understand how to use cryptocurrency and what are the benefits that can be had from using those cryptocurrencies.
So one of the things we're doing is we're giving away $30 worth of Bitcoin for free to any new customer, just so they can play with it and try it out and stuff.
So to make sure and clarify, not 30 Bitcoin, but 30
US dollars worth
of Bitcoin, because 30 Bitcoin is the jackpot. Right. So that's a cool initiative that you've taken on. And that would actually gravitate persons towards your business and to get them to use the Bitcoin ATM. So I mean that's a start, All right. So finally, tell us what types of capacity building activities can you point to for individuals in the Caribbean, business professionals seeking to get a better understanding of this space?
You just have to install an app on your phone, a Bitcoin wallet, and start playing with it. Buy something online, come to the ATM, try it out, and if you've used it a few times, it doesn't seem so weird. Like you'll get it.
So in other words, you're saying that you have to have that hands-on experience.
You just have to dive in and do it.
Yeah.
And then it won't be so strange. So.
Is there any type of academia that you refer to currently, just for your own knowledge, or any type of different sources, website, news outlets that you can direct persons to obtain the latest and the newest in the space?
I can't really think of anything, no.
No? So when you're looking for your crypto news, where do you go?
Well, okay, so like coinmarketcap.com tells you the current prices on Bitcoin and all these other coins. But again, I think all the other coins I don't think they're so important anymore. There was a time where Bitcoin was using the same technology for like 10 years, the first 10 years or so, right? And other people were coming out with other coins which were better in some way. Like they were faster, or they're cheaper, or they're more private or something. And so Bitcoin was sort of losing market share. But then they added a new feature to Bitcoin called SegWit, which allowed a new Lightning network, which is much cheaper, much faster, and much more private on top of Bitcoin. And it's called off-blockchain transactions, because most of the transactions don't actually need to do anything on the blockchain. But it's the same Bitcoin, and these transactions eventually settle on the blockchain. So once they had this, Bitcoin stopped losing market share to the other coins, and now the other coins don't really have any advantage over Bitcoin. And Bitcoin's so much bigger and so much more accepted in so many more different places. I mean, there's Bitcoin ATMs all over, right? So the need for these other coins has kind of gone away, I think. And so personally, I expect to just use Bitcoin.
So the Bitcoin is like the US dollar.
It's the big one.
Yeah.
But much bigger. It's bigger than all the rest combined.
Right.
And there's many thousands of other ones.
I know I've seen like in excess of like 3,000 different cryptocurrencies.
I think it's much higher than that even.
And Bitcoin
and it just keeps growing.
To the very top.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin had a breakthrough pretty earlier on, and while there was some negative connotation attached to Bitcoin because of the use on the dark web and what's not. I think that they've actually proven otherwise and shown that, while just like any type of currency, it can be used for bad, Bitcoin can also be used for good. And
Yeah.
they've been trying to focus a lot on the good that Bitcoin can be used for.
So just as a caution to people in Anguilla, there are lots of scams that use Bitcoin.
Yep.
Because Bitcoin, you can't send the money backwards if you are not unhappy with what happened, right? And so a lot of scammers do use it. So you have to be more careful with Bitcoin than you might with a credit card or something, where you might get your money back if it was a cheat.
Because it's decentralized.
There's nobody that can help you out.
Exactly.
So
And once it's gone, it's gone.
It's gone.
Forever. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually have a sign next to the ATM which says, do you understand Ponzi and how Ponzi schemes work and all this? Because it's some significant fraction of the people that come in there for the first time are there because somebody's trying to scam them out of money.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's a sad thing. So I have to explain this to a lot of people, how these scams work. There's all sorts of Ponzi scams. People say, I'll give you twice your money back in 60 days, right? And they do this for a while. A few people get twice their money back, and then they run away with all the rest of the money. And this has been going on for a couple hundred years, these Ponzi schemes, and now people are doing it with Bitcoin.
Well, at least, that's a good thing that you're looking out for the public's interest. Like,
Yeah.
You are making sure that your customers, what your customers are doing, are, getting involved in the transaction, and you can better inform them as to whether or not, this is something legit,
And-
because you know.
Right. And so, and it also, I sort of feel like, well, at least it got them in here, right, to talk about Bitcoin. They're learning about something interesting and useful.
Right.
But I've heard a few cases where people sent lots of money, before I'd ever talked to them. So.
Yeah, but I definitely think that while you've made so much invaluable contributions to developing tech on island, I think that you will definitely be one of the persons to lead the education process and the growth of financial technology or anything DLT crypto on island. I know we have some other players as well that are involved, and they would have started the process with our Anguilla utility token offering legislation and the utility token exchange legislation. But I think that, you really see the impact when it comes to educating the public and having them go off on their own and, putting what they've learned into practice. Like you said, just tampering or playing around with, the apps, the different apps. So I definitely enjoyed this conversation.
That's good.
With Mr. Cate. And I hope you guys do. And like I said, you can stay tuned to view the demo of the software which Mr. Cate would have developed as an alternative to using his Bitcoin ATM. And once again, Mr. Cate, thank you very much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
All right. The customer's ID is scanned and the amount of the transaction is entered into Recotra. We scan the customer's wallet address and we print 2 contracts. One for our records and one for the customer. You may also wish to use the ATM by scanning your ID and scanning your wallet address. The amount you wish to deposit is entered into the ATM and credited to your wallet, and the transaction is complete.
Any references within this episode can be found in the links provided below. For more information on our FinTech licensed businesses, please contact us by email at innovate@afsc.ai.